Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Harry Osiris, and this is my YouTube channel, grecochess. We are not going to continue with my Facebook friends. We're going to have a sort of interruption because we just have completed one game from the grecochess online tournament. And we're going to show to you the game that just completed. It is from Group 2. In Group 2, as you may remember, 2 out of the 4 players had no wins, and the other two, with 4 wins each, they would decide among themselves for who was going to advance. And these 2 players, as you can see, they are baraks7 from Israel and Mgc-89 from Brazil. Each of them, before this game was completed, they had 4 points. They had won all games against the other 2 opponents. And so the 2 games between them would decide for who is going to advance. And one of these games has been completed. It is a game that you're going to see now with baraks7 having the white pieces and Mgc-89 from Israel. This is an Mgc-89 from Brazil having the black pieces. You see the ratings 1662 for baraks7 and 1225 for Mgc-89. This makes baraks7 the favorite. Also, we are only going to show the part of the screen that shows the actual position in the board. And the reason for that is because we are taking the game from chess.com URL, and we don't want to spoil the surprise. We don't want to show in advance the next moves and the final result. And the game is going to begin. By the way, you can see on this left here who is ahead. If you see a number at the bottom left, it means that white is ahead. If you see a number here at the top left, it means that black is ahead. Currently it's 0.0. Since they haven't started, the game is completely even. And the computer will show with the green arrow which move the computer thinks is the best. And of course, if it coincides the move played with the player, it means that the player played the best move. And we're starting with baraks7 with the white pieces, and he starts with the so-called English opening. The pawn goes to c4. You see here this book, so long as you see this book, it means that players follow the book moves. And Mgc-89, pawn to e6. Knight f3 for baraks7, and pawn to b6 for Mgc-89. Pawn to c4 is the English opening, as we mentioned. It is the third most popular opening after the pawns to e4 and to d4. Pawn to g3, this is basically preparing to fianchetto. The same thing with the pawn to b7, the previous move for black. Pawn to g3 for baraks7. And yes, we see the bishop on b7 for Mgc-89 and the bishop on g2 for baraks7. Both players fight for the control of the long diagonal that goes from h1 to a8. And now you see the question mark and exclamation point in an orange circle. This is inaccuracy. Inaccuracy for Mgc-89. The computer would rather have the knight go to f6. As you see, the pawn g5 is in a difficult situation. Currently, it's attacked once by the knight on f3 and defended once by the queen on d8. And because of a pin, even if the pawn was attacked twice, the knight could not leave its position, otherwise the bishop on g2 is lost. But although immediately it's not terrible, it creates a long-term weakness. Pawn to h3 for Mgc-89 wants to stop the pawn advancing to g4, and queen to f6 for Mgc-89. Computer would rather have the pawn go to h6, and question mark without the orange circle means that is not an inaccuracy any longer, it is a mistake. And after the first 5 moves, we completed move number 5. White is ahead by 1.7. You see the number 1.7. One inaccuracy and one mistake for black, and white is already ahead by 1.7. Let's see how game will continue. Pawn to d4 for white. Yes, control the center. A nice central pawn on d4. In addition, this opens the diagonal from of the bishop c1. Now next move, the pawn on g5 is under attack. Let's see how and if my Mgc-89 is going to defend it. Nope. If anything, this is a mistake. Pawn to d5. Why? First of all, it allows white to capture the pawn on g5 with a tempo. It's called because it's attacking the queen on f6. And even worse, by this pawn is that if the knight is forced to leave f3, for example, if bishop takes on g5 and queen takes on g5, and then next move, the knight takes on g5, then the black bishop cannot take the white bishop on g2. Even if it could, of course, the loss of a queen is very important. But now we have complete loss of queen. Let's see what will happen if baraks7 will be able to take advantage of the situation. And yes, bishop goes to g5, free pawn. That was quite simple to notice. Of course, Mgc-89 is going to save the queen, sends it to g6, but the queen is soon running out of squares. There are a few squares for the time being, f5, e4, and g7, h5, but the squares where the queen can go become fewer and fewer. And baraks7 pushes his pawn to h4. Why, you may wonder, the pawn, well, the computer had the favorite move, the knight goes to c3, and it's only calling this a good move, a fair move. You see the check mark. But what baraks7 would want, I believe, is to be able to move the knight from f3 without the bishop on g5 being lost, being taken by the queen. And Mgc-89 grabs the pawn on c4. And now the knight, baraks7 can send the knight on e5. Before that was impossible because the bishop on g5 would be lost. Now the knight attacks the queen and the queen cannot take the bishop on g5. Where can the queen go? Let's see. f5, e4, g7, h5. But no matter where the queen goes, the white bishop from g2 will take the black bishop on b7. Not only that, but after baraks7 wins a bishop, then the rook on a8 is lost. Unless the queen decides to do something else. And before, I'm sorry, the queen cannot even go to e4, as I mentioned before, because the bishop is here, can only go to f5, h5, g7. The black queen has only 3 choices. Let's see where Mgc7 is going to send, Mgc-89, I'm sorry, will send their queen. To f5. Mistakes is the computer. The computer would rather have Mgc-89 not save the queen and take the bishop on g2. Of course, then they lose the queen, but then Mgc-89 can take the knight with the h6 pawn. And you would have black losing their queen for 2 pieces. It's not good, of course, this position, but it is less bad than what you're going to see here. Why? Because had they lost their queen for 2 pieces, they would be down by 3 points. Now, assuming baraks7 plays correctly, and it's not difficult to see how, they're going to win 8 points because 3 the bishop plus 5 the rook. But let's see how games continues. And yes, an easy move for baraks7 to see, grabs the bishop of Mgc-89 and threatens the rook. And Mgc-89 decides to reply with a fork. You see the pawn on f6 threatens simultaneously the knight on e5 and the bishop on g5. At this point, we completed the first 10 moves and Barak7 starts having a big advantage. The computer says plus 7.1. 7.1 advantage for Barak7. That's already ahead by 3 pawns. And that is what happened the first 10 moves. Continue next one. Queen to a4 with the check instead of directly taking the rook. White has what's called the Zwischenschwung, an intermediate move. You will have the queen this way. But the computer doesn't think this is the best. The best would be pawn to e4 because that move would have threatened the uh, black queen. And where could the queen go? If I don't think the queen could go anywhere. Let's go back. If pawn goes to e4, the black queen, nope, 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 nope. Yes, it is true. Had Barak7 played the best move pawn to e4, then the black queen, the queen of Mgc9, would have been lost. But still, Barak7 is quite a lot ahead. King to e7 for Mgc89. What were the choices? If Mgc89 tried to block it with the knight from b8 to d7, the knight would be lost with a checkmate, yes. Queen to d7. Otherwise, you either go to d8 that the computer prefers or to e7. I'm not sure what the difference would have been. Of course, the white king would like to escape, castle by hand to escape far from the attacking pieces of white, but no matter where it goes, it doesn't have too much space to go. And yes, now finally Barak7 takes the black rook, although the computer would prefer the pawn to go to g4. Let's see what would happen if instead the pawn went to g4. Where could the queen go? The queen is under attack and cannot go here, 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 here. Nope, 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 and nope. That's why although Barak7 plays a very good move that will guarantee the victory, it was not the very best. Because Barak7 could have won the black queen and then the rook. Bishop to h6 for Mgc89, trying to gain some space. Not sure how much that can help. Anything, that is the problem. The computer would rather have the pawn on f6, take the bishop on g5. Of course, cannot take the knight on e5 because there's a pin. But if he took the bishop on g5, at least black wins a piece. Otherwise, white can exchange the bishops and then the knight is out of the pin. Pawn to e4. Finally, the black queen is attacked. But now that it's attacked, the computer would rather have the queen take the pawn on a7. Queen takes the knight. The queen sees it cannot go anywhere now. So let's take whatever we can and wins the knight on e5. And of course, Barak7 will win the opponent's queen, but loses the bishop. And Barak7 will win a pawn at c4 with the queen. And Mgc89 moves the pawn to c5. Usually it's good to move it to control the center, but with so much material down, you see Barak7 is already up by plus 12 points materially. This doesn't mean too much. We completed the first 15 move, and as you see, Barak7 has an advantage of 7.9. Game has really been decided by now. But it will take a few more moves, and of course, Barak7 better be very careful until the end. too many times games that were considered to be winning for one side ended up after a careless error being lost. Knight to c3 for barak7 develops the last remaining piece, the knight on c3. Yes. Mgc-89 will grab a pawn on h4, which barak7 is going to win now with the rook. Bishop to g5 for Mgc-89, threatening the white rook. But white is going to place the rook on g4, threatening the bishop on g5. Pawn to h6 for Mgc-89, supporting the bishop on g5. And barak7 pushes the pawn to f4 and threatens the bishop at g5 that I'm not sure where exactly it can go. The bishop cannot be safe. Perhaps what Mgc-89 can do is push the pawn to h5 and threaten the white rook. But still the rook will take the bishop. So that is not even not helping either. Knight to d7 for Mgc-89. Finally developing that knight. Barak7 pushes the pawn back to c6. You see now that at this point, after 19 moves, white has developed all the pieces except castling. Only the rook at a1 is at the beginning position. Let's see here. After the 18th move of white. But look at black. They have the rook and two knights in the original position. So white clearly developed much better and much faster. And this is the cause of winning. Of course, the tactics are there, but the tactics don't come out of nowhere. If you develop fast and control the crucial points of the game, then the tactics will come. Let's continue where we were. Bishop to c6 for barak7. Threatens the knight on d7. Of course, the king will take it back, but when you're so much ahead, you want exchanges. Knight goes to b8 for Mgc-89, and bishop back to b5. And Mgc-89 pushes the pawn on a6 to threaten the bishop on b5. Let's see what will happen, because if the bishop goes back to a4, there's a fork. Pawn goes to b5. Of course, barak7 is so much ahead that they can afford to have to lose the material with this kind of tactics and is still going to win the game. But we're now after move 21. And we like to have the recap after every 5 moves. So we're going to see what is the position after the first 20 moves. White, barak7 is ahead by 8.6. Clearly the game has, for all purposes, been completed. After move 21, it is now a little bit down to 8.2. And white will get a pawn for the knight. It's not so simple as I thought. Knight goes to d7 for Mgc-89. They didn't take the bishop because then the queen would take the knight. Well, not that it makes any difference, but when you're ahead, you want to exchange. When you're behind, you don't want to exchange pieces. Again, barak7 threatens the knight of Mgc-89. Rook tries to save it. Barak7 gains the knight, and the king will take back the bishop. Again, now, after the king's move, the bishop on g5 can escape if white lets it go. But barak7 has one more what's called the intermediate move, Zik and Zook. Instead of immediately taking the bishop, prefers long castling. Computer thinks the best move, and by doing so, the rook from a1 goes to d1 and also enters the attack. King goes to c7. And now barak7 is not going to grab the bishop because this is the last chance I get to grab the bishop on g5. Instead, the queen takes a pawn on e6. But let's see a little bit, because from this point on, after the knight takes the bishop, you see the m12. From now on, it's 12 moves until mate. If both sides play their best game, white is going to checkmate. So let's see what's going to happen. Move 25, we set the long castling for white. King to, and this makes it m11. King to c7. So now we completed the first 25 moves, and baraks7 has m11, meaning if they play the very best way, they have checkmate in 11 moves. Queen to e6. Now it's m15. It's not the best possible move. The computer would rather have the knight go to b5, of course, for a human. If they are ahead, if they have m with more than 10, it's impossible or extremely hard to find all the correct move for mate at the shortest possible way, but they're still winning. M15 after the queen takes on e6. Rook on e7. M6, the computer doesn't like it too much. This loses a rook, but the position was losing no matter what says the computer comment. Knight goes to d5 check, the best move, and also it is a fork. The knight on d5 threatens both the king on c7 and the rook on e7. And it's m5, as you see below. King to d8, now it's m4. Knight to e7 with a discover check, check from the rook from d1. And it's m3. King to c7, and it is m1. Checkmate in one move. And baraks7 played the 29th and last move. That was a checkmate. And this is queen to c8. And baraks7 thus won the game and guarantees his advancing to the final round. And let's see now what does the computer think about the game. We will need to stop share for one moment. And start sharing again the entire screen. And here we are. This is a computer evaluation, 95% accuracy for baraks7 and 78.5 for Mgc-89. Baraks7 played as if his rating was 2100, way above the 1662 that you see that was his online rating, while Mgc-89 played for 750, quite below his 1225. If you go to the various categories, baraks7 had almost every move other than one good move being at least excellent, and had nothing in the negative category, no inaccuracies, mistakes, misses, or blunders. Nobody had brilliant moves, but baraks7 had two great moves. 13 versus 5 moves for baraks7, 13 versus 9 excellent for Mgc-89, good moves 2 versus 1 for Mgc-89, book moves 4 versus 3 for baraks7, and in the negatives, only Mgc-89 had a few, 2 inaccuracies, 3 mistakes, and nobody had misses or blunders. And let's see now what is happening in the overall category. Grecochess, dual pairings, and we only have 9 games remaining for the first round to complete. The first 6 games are from Group 1, where Hunting Achievements has not played a single move. And has 3 weeks of vacation remaining. Let's see if during the next 3 weeks Hunting Achievements is going to play. Other than that, Maxim Govorukha has already 4 points, 4 wins, and Hunting Achievements needs to play spectacularly well with a very great result to advance. But Butterfly and U86303002 have already been eliminated. Group 2, after this win, baraks7 from Israel has 5 points. He's guaranteed to continue, while Boris excuse me, while Mgc-89 from Brazil needs to win the other game in order to tie and also advance. Group 3, it is myself, Dehari from Greece, and Delaine from Hungary. We are tied with 4 points, 4 wins each of us, and everything would be decided on our game. In fact, on the 2 games between us. And group 4, my skin from Italy has already advanced. Let's see what's happening in the other tournament. That is hosted by my Italian subscriber. It is Underwater Moonlight. We have completed 302 games and remaining 346, and let's see what is happening in the pairings. We are near the middle. And the Group 1, Lotus Time Chess from Japan finally did not win a game, had a draw, so is leading with 10.5 points. 10 wins and 1 draw. And of course, is in great shape, has a great chance to advance. Group 2, Spider99 from Egypt. I apologize. Yesterday, accidentally, I said he's from Serbia or Croatia. He from Egypt. He's leading with 7.7 wins until now. Group 3. The organizer of the tournament, my Italian subscriber Zanilor, is leading with 9 points, 9 wins and 2 losses. Group 4. Rishi Raj 3 from India is leading with 3 points. Everybody has at least 2 points because Yohashir timed out all the games, so everybody else has at least two. But Rishi Raj 3 also won a game against Not Nerdy and third and got the 3rd point. Group 5. Imam MMT from Indonesia is leading with 9 points, 9 wins against Pearl Perez, that was leading until now from Palestine, has 8 points, lost a game against IMA MMT. Group 6. Mathis B 2008 from France is leading with 9 points, 9 wins. Group 7. Chentar 66 from Uzbekistan is leading with 9 points. Group 8. Khaled Katab from Egypt and myself from Greece are leading with 3 points, but Khaled Khattab has 3 wins, 1 loss, while I have 3 wins and 5 losses, which means I don't have that many games remaining. So clearly, Khaled Khattab is the one ahead. In fact, with me having more losses than wins, things don't look so nice. In Group 9, Hikaru Carlsen Tal has 10 wins, 10 points, and is ahead. This concludes the coverage of the game from grecochess. We'll continue with the games of my Facebook friends. And the next one is the second game of Alexander Inzik. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for viewing. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the subscribers. If you have not subscribed yet, all it takes is just one click at the subscribe button. To the likes, the positive comments. I'm Harilaos Aniziris. This is grecochess. Goodbye.